Four levels of exploitation framework. Extremely important class here before we get into the actual models and data. You need to understand that to exploit your opponents, there are a lot more levels than simply reacting to what they already did, which are level 1 exploits. What are level 1 exploits? Well, typically when you think about an exploit, you're going to probably think about like overfolding in someone who bats too strong or overcalling against someone who bats too weak. Right? That's the very typical way people think about exploitation. They get to the river, they know that their opponent is very active, so when they bet, they figure out, okay, this guy's probably over bluffing, so I'm going to take a hand that is marginal and I'm going to always call with that. That's a level 1 exploit. Another example of level 1 exploit is to think, oh, my opponent is very weak tight. If I overbet here, he's going to fold. Therefore, I'm going to take this marginal bluffing hand and I'm going to bluff it all the time because he's overfolded. That's great. That's nice. That's correct. However, that's a level 1 exploit. The problem with level 1 exploits is that everyone can do them. Everyone can use their brain cells and figure out that, okay, if my opponent folds too much, I should bluff more. If he calls too much, I should bluff less. If he bluffs too much, I should call more. And if he bluffs a little, I should fold more. These types of exploits don't have too much potential for edge generation, especially against regulars, because everyone with the brain cell, everyone that plays this game seriously, can properly think and properly derive level 1 exploits. The real money is on level 2, level 3, and level 4 exploits. If you got to this course, it's because you like my content and you have probably heard me talking about this. But I have to spend a video here talking about this because perhaps you haven't seen me talking about this before, and this is going to be extremely important for the understanding of the future videos. So we covered level 1 exploits. Level 1 exploits are about reacting to what your opponent did. Now, what is a level 2 exploit? Level 2 exploit, one of my favorites, because it addresses the very obvious fact, which unfortunately most people neglect, that if your opponent has an imbalanced action, like a betting range, automatically all the adjacent actions also become imbalanced. That's the definition of a level 2 exploit. Any imbalance introduced in a given action makes all of the adjacent actions also imbalanced. So an adjacent action is an action the opponent could have taken in the same node. So if he bets the flop, he could have also checked the flop, right? So check is adjacent to betting. If he raises a given spot, he could have also called or folded, right? So raising is adjacent to calling, which is adjacent to folding. Now, the very important fact that you need to understand level 2 exploits is that if your opponent has an imbalanced betting range, he automatically has an imbalanced checking range. If your opponent has an imbalanced raising range, he automatically has an imbalanced calling and folding range. This is really, really important for you to understand because if you don't understand this, then you'll never be able to apply level 2 exploits. But it's very easy to understand, right? If you say that your opponent is betting too strong on the turn, oh my god, this opponent has a very strong betting range on the turn. What does that mean in practice, right? That means that he's taking bluffing hands that should be in his betting range and he's putting into the checking range. This makes, obviously, the betting range too strong because it lacks bluffs. But where did these bluffs go? They went to the checking range. Therefore, a strong betting range means a weak checking range, and vice versa. A weak betting range means a strong checking range, right? So the adjacent actions are also going to be imbalanced. And when we're going to be discussing exploits throughout this course, we're always going to be thinking about level 2 exploits. Okay, I'm modeling this behavior in my opponent. It seems like they're double barreling too strong. Okay, they're double barreling too strong, which means that probably will overfold turn bets. That's a level 1 exploit. Now, because they are betting too strong, this means that their checking range contains too much air, which means that they're probably going to overfold to aggression if we play aggressively. Then we're going to what? We're going to murder their checking ranges. We're going to attack their checking ranges with a lot of aggression. That's a level 2 exploit. So because the betting range is too strong, the checking range is too weak, and we're going to exploit that with aggression. That's a level 2 exploit. Now, levels 3 and 4 are where the money really is in poker, and I think a very small percentage of players are actively applying level 3 and 4 exploits into their games. A level 3 exploit is about adjusting future street strategy based on a leak from your opponent, and level 4 exploits is about adjusting early street strategy due to your opponent's mistake. Now, not only the adjacent actions get imbalanced if your opponent makes a mistake, pretty much the entire game tree gets imbalanced if they do that, which allows you to adjust future street strategy and early street strategy. So one very simple example I'm going to show you right here in this simulation PI solver which we're going to see together in the future models, don't worry about it, is a simulation where we're modeling an opponent that overbluffs rivers. So the only thing that we did here, and we did this programmatically through my program that I showed you in a past video, we increased the bluffing frequency with air from our opponent. So we have a tree here where he's supposed to triple barrel with the pot size. And of course, you understand that with the pot size, your opponent should have 33% bluffs in his betting range, right? If you're good with poker theory, you already know that. So if you filter here for ace high and nothing in the betting range, for him to be balanced, he should have 33% bluffs. But we node locked rivers with my program, and here we can see this opponent has 34% bluffs. So he has 1% more bluffs than he should. He also might have some low pairs here, but no, only unpaired hands. So he has 1% more bluffs than he should. If he has more bluffs than he should, what's going to happen to your bluff catching strategy? You're going to want to overcall, right? So that's exactly what the solver does here. We can see that if he bets pot, we should be folding like 50% of our range, but we're only folding 21% of our range. And across all the different textures, we're barely folding with our ranges, right? Take a look at that. We're overcalling all of the runouts, one more so than others, but we're massively overcalling all of the runouts, almost having no folding range and having a pretty substantial raising range. So that's a level 1 exploit. In villain over bluffs, we overcall, right? A lot of these hands would not belong to a GTO bluff catching strategy, but because our opponent is over bluffing, we are printing money with our bluff catchers, and therefore we should always call them. Now, if our opponent is over bluffing on the river, what do you think is going to happen to your earlier street strategy? Think about it for a second before I show you the simulation, because this allows you to properly think about level 4 exploits. How do you adjust early street strategy knowing that your opponent on the river is going to end up over bluffing? What happens to your strategy? I can tell you very quickly what happens, and don't worry, we're going to see this more in depth over future modules. But because your opponent is over bluffing the river, this adds EV to get into that line because you're making more money than you should. And how do you get to the river facing a bet? By calling the turn, right? So because your opponent is over bluffing the river, calling the turn now has increased in EV, and therefore you're gonna want to overcall the turn. So here we're calling almost all one pair hands against double barrel because the river is getting over bluffed. Relative to solver here, we're overcalling by 10%. And because now we're overcalling on the turn, there's more money to be made on the turn. There's more money to be made on the flop because we can get to that next street. So you're also going to be overcalling the flop against your opponent. You can see here that we only fold 7.7% of our range, where GTO-wise would be folding about 25% of hands. And you can also see that we're going to be slow playing a lot of our value hands, because if your opponent is over bluffing, that also adds EV to our strong hands, allowing this opponent to put more money into the pot for us. Right, so we're going to be slow playing early street, we're going to be overcalling early street on the flop, just because our opponent is over bluffing right there on the river. That's a level 4 exploit. And a lot of the advanced exploits you're going to learn in this course are going to be level 4 exploits. Sometimes level 2, sometimes level 3, but a lot of the advanced exploits you're going to learn here are level 4 exploits. How you anticipate the fact that your opponent is going to make that mistake, and how you can take advantage of that to adjust early street and make the most out of that mistake. We're going to be learning level 4, level 3, level 2, and level 1 exploits across the different potential leaks that our opponents have at the tables. Now that you understood the 4 levels of exploitation framework, I want to follow with the next video by giving you tips on how to maximize EV when thinking about exploits. I have a lot of experience with that, so I can help you overcome some of the potential mistakes you can make along the way with your adventures of exploiting other players. That's what we're going to be talking about in the next video. I see you there.